into momentum is a theme that challenges us not only to remember, but to reimagine. Over the last 30 years, Montserrat experience with the Soufrière Hills Volcano has been one of profound transformation, a journey marked by loss, resilience, science, and adaptation. And so today we ask a forward-looking question: what is next? What's next? What next for communities living with risks? What next for areas shaped and sometimes shaken by volcanic activity? What next for the way we plan, educate, and invest, particularly in places like Zone C, where risk and memory are tightly woven together? This afternoon, we are joined by a distinguished panel bringing together expertise in science, disaster management, governance, and development, all committed to shaping a more resilient Montserrat. Let me introduce them to you. We have the Honorable Premier of Montserrat, Mr. Reuben T. Meade, Professor Eliza Calder, Chair of the SAC Committee and Professor of Volcanology, former Governor of Montserrat, Mr. Frank Savage, Professor Richie Robertson, Geologist at the UE Seismic Research Center, Dr. Graham Ryan, Director of the Montserrat Volcano Observatory, and Lieutenant Colonel Alvin Ryan, my boss, the Director of the Disaster Management Coordination Agency, DMC. We thank each of you for being here, and let's begin. Good afternoon to everyone. No introductory statement, we're going straight into the question. Okay, this question is for each of our panelists. As we reflect on 30 years of living with the Soufrière Hills Volcano, what does it mean to look south today? And how should we shape the future of that part of Montserrat? I begin with Ms. Calder. Professor Calder, go ahead.
Are these on? Thank you. Yeah. So looking south and opportunities, which I think in my mind, and I'm just speaking as an individual, not necessarily as a person on the SAC committee or anything. Having worked here in Montserrat since 1996, not consistently since that time, but a lot at the beginning of the eruption, and obviously in the last 11 years as part of SAC. I think the clear opportunities in my mind for activities in the south would be related to tourism, perhaps geopark, and farming. We don't have a current picture, sort of zoomed out picture of Soufrière Hills in front of us, but the one I showed in my talk, this beautiful, it has, of course, the lava dome, but the large part of the flanks of the volcano, as most of you know, are these beautiful, luscious, green, fertile volcanic slopes. And so I think it's clear that 15 years after the last activity, that one can look to do additional kinds of activities in this zone. And I would say, as I recently presented in my talk, that there is the scientific information on which to make fairly detailed decisions, fairly granular decisions about where in Zone V may be possible to consider certain activities. I'm not, of course, talking about activities that relate to building substantial infrastructure or long-term things like that. I'm talking about activities that would potentially make best use of this window of opportunity that we seem to be in, where the volcano is still relatively quiet. And the likelihood is that pause is going to extend for some more years. We don't know when that's going to change. But while it's in the situation that it is, there is a scientific information. There is probabilistic information about pyroclastic flows. There is probabilistic information about the areas which ballistics can reach to. And that's the kind of information that you could use in a systematic way to make decisions about access or, what kinds of access or what kinds of activities in certain areas for certain periods of time. I think I'll leave leave it there for now.
Mr. Savage, yes, you're next.
You want me to talk on the same thing?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Those of you here this morning might have heard you say that I do a fair amount of lecturing at universities, colleges, and right down to junior schools. And in my presentation, I always start by saying in 1993, when my late wife and I landed here, this was as close to paradise as you could imagine. And 2 years later, when Reuben had worked excessively hard getting everything back on stream in 1995, Plymouth looked like a sparkling new pin. Montserrat has always been captivating, and even now, 30 years later, that natural beauty is still there. I was telling my driver today that on a Sunday when we didn't have too much on, which wasn't very often, my day's treat was to drive all the way round the island, around the circular route. And my biggest regret is that I didn't put my video camera on, because that video, you could sell that for £1 million a time. And then the trip down to St. Patrick's. Clearly, with the events of Boxing Day 1997, which was 6 or 8 weeks after we had left, had a massive, devastating effect on the island. On my first visit back, I was taken up in the helicopter and I asked to go and look at St. Patrick's, and we flew over it, and as I was saying, when are we going to get to St. Patrick's? And he said, yeah, you have flown over it. So the volcanic history of the island is something, and there are very good reasons why, I am sure, but there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people out there who every year make a summer holiday to a volcanic destination. There's a firm in London that does nothing else. It's got a very glossy brochure, or it's a booklet, not a brochure, to the sort of top 20 volcano destinations in the world. And I don't know the reasons why, I'll say we, if you will permit me, why we haven't been able to exploit that. I was talking to Reuben a little earlier about the excellent team you've got working in London at the moment. And coincidentally, she sent me an email this afternoon. And I think we've just got to make a much more determined effort with members of Parliament, with the media, and I'm sure that there are tourism journalists who would love to come here, to be given a conducted program. Seeing Montserrat in its present condition, for people who spend a lot of time visiting volcanoes, is not going to turn them off. But we've got to have the story ready to tell them. We've got to have the book ready for them to take it back. And even if you're not coming to Montserrat to marvel at the volcano, I've been put in a villa in Woodlands. And I have to say, last night, looking out on the rainforest, listening to the rain. Sounds different in London, but here it is quite pleasant. I don't think we should find it hard to can and sell Montserrat. And it should get even better. I've been hearing of the large-scale projects which hopefully are coming online in the next couple of years. And perhaps like 1995, that will take Montserrat back to the takeoff point for its economy. Because you deserve it, the island deserves it, and Montserratians, from the moment you arrive and go through the airport lounge, you get that warm sense of your being welcomed.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Savage. I now move on to the Honorable Premier, Mr. Reuben Meade. And the question is to you, as we reflect 30 years of living with the Soufrière Hills Volcano, what does it mean to look south in terms of development? And how should we shape the future of that part of in terms of Zone V, Zone C?
Yeah, as I had intimated this morning, we must never look at the volcano as a crisis situation. We have to look at it as a challenge and opportunity. The last eruptive event was in 2010, some 15 years ago. But we're still treating certain parts of the south as though the volcano is still very, very much alive and we don't have a monitoring system. Given the work that the MVO does and does constantly, the upgrading of the equipment, we need to be in a position to do a lot more in the south. Why is it that fishermen cannot fish in the waters in the south? Should not be a criminal offense. We have lots of animals in the south. Why can't persons go and hunt those animals in Long Ground or elsewhere to make a living? Let's move further north in the south. Plymouth, we've made a cabinet decision either last week or the other week. I was just trying to look at it, find out which week it was. We're working with the Montserrat National Trust, and I see Sarita just walked in, so very good time to mention it, where we're looking at creating Plymouth as a UNESCO geopark so that we can benefit from the tourism element of it. We have to also look at Fort Gut, being able to continue or at least start dredging Fort Gut so that we can get more sand and aggregate coming out of there. The transportation and haulage distance from Fort Gut to the old port, very, very short distances, and therefore it means that we can make more of that area. It does not have to be 24-hour entry. It could be daytime entry alone. Moving further north, let's still stick in the south. We're looking at the south and we're seeing lots of trees growing. I think it is time for us to be very selective and determine what trees we want to grow in that area. Be it coconut trees, mango trees, breadfruit trees, or what have you. Let us start planting those trees so that we can utilize them later on in our micro-enterprise sector. Don't just allow the birds to determine what grows there. We have to make a determination of what grows there as well. Moving further north in the south, we have 2 production geothermal wells. They've been dug since 2013, and we're sitting on them as though they're just little holes in the earth, and we can do nothing about it. We have to get those wells into production. John Blundy and his team are here, as I mentioned before. And we're hoping to have those wells, not hoping, we will have those wells flowing by the end of September this year so that they can do the work which they're expected to do through the Oxford Institute. We are also looking at exploring and developing geothermal power so that the electricity cost in Montserrat can be reduced substantially, but also looking at other industrial activity which could be developed as a consequence of that low-cost electricity. And we're actively pursuing at least 2 such companies who are showing an interest in doing that. I remember looking at some Rastamen in Dominica who have developed the Screws hot water establishment in Dominica. Grew from just a little small, humble beginning to a major tourist attraction in Dominica. We have the hot water, we have the hot water pond. Let us also make that into a tourist attraction. And for persons like Frank and myself who are arthritic, it will also help us for us to go there and be treated in the hot waters in Montserrat. So it creates an additional industrial possibility inside there. I've just had a discussion earlier with Mull, the utility company, where we will be putting in, subject to final approval of funding, not from HMG, but from another source, where we're putting back water into the Foxes Bay area. And that is also to allow us to have construction activity taking place there again. It also will allow us to do farming activities there in terms of animal farming and animal husbandry because the water will be available. We're also looking at Foxes Bay, a major development which we're looking at in Foxes Bay. The designs have been done by a local design artist, and if we get that up and going, it is going to make a substantial difference. We're also currently looking at a letter of intent with another company looking at how we can utilize the ash. Now, if we can utilize the ash, it means that we can clean up the areas from Cork Hill to Foxes Bay, wherever we have the ash, so that we can now allow persons to be able to rebuild in those areas. So these are some of the possibilities there. After that, we're at Belém. At Belém, which is a cutoff point between the north and the south, we are looking at recharging the Belém Valley so that we can have the river flowing again, so that when the river floods, that the water will be channeled properly and persons in Islesby Hill will be able to cross safely, but also be able to do a hotel development looking at Viewpoint Hotel, Hollander Estates, and the Belém Valley, where the Gulf Coast could be reinstated along with some luxury apartments and a hotel within that area. And then beyond that, we're north.
Okay. Dr. Graham, Mr. Meade mentioned a number of projects in the pipeline to develop the south of the island as we are looking south. How do we balance risk awareness in terms of shaping the future of that part of Montserrat?
Yeah, so I'm here representing the MVO as a director.
Yes.
And the MVO is a very valuable resource on Montserrat. We're very lucky to have it. And, you know, we produce a lot of high-quality information about the hazard and about the risk. And our role is really to feed that information to the Premier, to the Governor, etc., so that they can make the best decisions based on the available evidence. So I think that's really is the role of the MVO, to say, okay, these are the risks, and then the Governor and the Premier say, well, you know, this is worth it. This risk is low enough, and the benefits are high enough that this makes sense. And also, the volcanic risk is only one part of the puzzle, because you may, there are other economic decisions to be made, like whether you're rebuilding roads, etc., or building other infrastructure, and the risks to those are different than the risks of going into Plymouth for a day, for example. So all of those things. So I think what the MVO can do is provide nuanced information to the decision makers so they can make the best decisions and based on the available information. Because I think one of the key things is that, like, the risk of something happening with very little warning is quite low, very, very low, 3 in a million, or those numbers are still under revision, but basically very low. But according to the deliberations, the risk of the volcano restarting at some time in the coming decades is still reasonably high. So that's what the MVO can do is give that information, and then those decisions can be made. So I think that's where we'll go with that. The Premier mentioned the geopark, which would actually cover the whole of Montserrat, would become a geopark. But obviously, Plymouth is a very particular, part of the heritage of Montserrat. But it's also a tourism. A lot of people would want to come to, who come to Montserrat want to visit Plymouth because it's a unique place and shows a unique history and tells a unique story. And I think one of the things that I've seen is over the last decade or so, there's been a lot of vegetation regrowth in Plymouth, and a lot of changes happening. And so I think one of the governmental decisions I think probably that needs to be made is, what is the policy? Is it a laissez-faire approach where the vegetation is allowed to regrow, or certain parts of it try to be preserved? So I think that's at a policy level, a decision could be made about that. But I don't want to take up too much time, so I'm going to stop now.
Mr. Ryan.
Sorry, if I may. Sorry for
continue,
doing this.
Mr. Meade.
Just following on from Graham, I think sometimes from a scientific standpoint, we talk about the risk in terms of numbers. What is the risk of me walking through certain streets in London and being stabbed or being robbed? Let's look at it in that context. Yeah. And one of the things which we keep saying, at least which I keep saying, it is safer in most parts of Montserrat than walking in certain streets in London. But people walk in London. So why is it that we are not allowing ourselves the possibility of utilizing what we have? And that is the premise on which I would like for us to focus a lot of attention, rather than saying it's 1 in a million or whatever it is. I don't understand what that means. I understand what it means to walk in London and feel safe or not safe, and being able to do the same thing in Montserrat. Yeah, and I take very, very strong objection, Frank, forgive me for this, where a visitor to Montserrat is going to seek to tell me where I can or cannot go in Montserrat because they have certain other considerations which they're taking in mind. And I think Eliza and her team should be in a position to look at all of the SAC reports and come up with a determination in terms of risk assessment and micro risk maps for Montserrat, so we can make a better determination of the utilization of the southern part of Montserrat.
Professor Robertson, you are.
Can I say something? I'm sorry, I was patiently waiting my turn, but and I need to preface what I'm saying by saying that I am here. I assume you have invited me to the panel in my capacity as Richard Robertson, a geologist who have worked in the region for about 30 years, who have been engaged in Montserrat for that time. I'm not necessarily representing the University of West Indies or the Seismic Research Center. I'm prefacing what I'm about to say by that, so it's clear. I think one of the things, unfortunately, to me, and I, just to say that, I think the south of Montserrat has infinite potential. And I think you need to reimagine the south of Montserrat. You have to reimagine it. And you have to reimagine it and bring the people in your imagination. So I hear what the Premier is saying, and I empathize with him. But I will tell him that I would urge him to bring the people of Montserrat, both here and in the diaspora, in with it. Because if he's gone in the next 5 years, those ideas will not continue. I've been here long enough to see politicians come and go, and it's not clear to me what people want to do in the South. And in my perception, really, frankly, I think there's a failure of leadership, failure in the context of failure for Montserrat and what is good for Montserrat at all kinds of levels. At all kinds of levels, both scientifically and politically. I'll explain to you why. Politically, at all levels, British government, local government, it's not been clear to me what they want to do in the South. Everybody wants to stay safe. It's true. There's no way that's safe. There's no way in the world that's safe. We all live with volcanoes. We have to deal with the risk. Leaders require you to assess that risk and determine what level of risk you're willing to take and lead the people in the direction you want them to go in. Scientifically, I love my comrades, my brethren at MVO, and they're fantastic at what they do. But MVO at different stages, and not necessarily now, have played it very safe. I understand why you need to. You say things like what you're saying, that a risk is this and that. But you need to work with the authorities. If you really are going to be an organization, which is a professional body in Montserrat, that is scientifically based, you need to work with the civil authorities to figure out how best to utilize the land space that they have. Otherwise, you don't survive. If you have half the country you can't use because the volcano is not erupting, because the volcano is so unsafe, that the risk people tell you that is as safe as other places, you need to figure out how you're going to work with them to do it. So I think that when I say there's a failure of leadership, a failure to reimagine what is possible, that's what I mean. I think Montserrat has the ability to look at what you have in the South, determine what you want to do. And when I say Montserrat, I don't mean the government alone, and with all due respect, Reuben and his fantastic ideas alone. I think you need to figure out a way how you're going to pull the people in and generate a community effort to push it forward, so that if and when you're not there, whoever is not there, you could still move. Because what I find has happened is that you're not moving forward. It's almost like the volcano pull out your heart and you're still suffering. You're living, yes, but you ain't really quite living. You're suffering. You need to build that heart back that I used to see when I was here first. Montserrat was an amazing country when I was here first. You're moving in all kind of direction. And what I see a lot is people who are, to a large extent, kind of marking time and trying to survive. And I think you could do a lot more than that if you imagine what you could do with your land space. But everybody had to imagine it, not just the politicians alone, or not the scientists alone. Thank you.
If I may, since it's a panel discussion, I don't want to take over everything here. There's some of us who are willing to take chances. But there are some politicians in Montserrat, which is when I spoke of the lost decade, where politicians are absolutely afraid of the volcano. And therefore, they are unwilling even to go into Plymouth because they are so afraid of the volcano. So the leadership is not going to come from them, but the people have been asking through song, through their own actions, could you free us up so that we can utilize our own country?
Okay. So Professor Robertson mentioned in terms of some of the challenges we face in terms of developing areas south, weak governments. Any other challenges? What are some of the other biggest challenges in terms of developing the south sustainably? Anyone? Any?
The challenge, again, as somebody who has been there, done that, retired, and come back. Sometimes I feel like one of those dinosaurs. But I am back trying to lead a new team of persons who will have that vision to take it forward after I have demitted office again. Let us, as a people, focus on what we want to do with our country, and don't let any governor, wherever they come from, come with an agenda and determine that they will have absolutely no discussion in terms of the exclusion zone. The political directorate has to take charge through the legislative framework provided to them and the scientific advice which we have available to us. I can give you a 99% assurance that over 90% of the politicians have never read a SAC report. So therefore, how will they make a decision in terms of utilizing the lands which we have when they themselves don't understand what is going on? Yeah, and that's a challenge which we have to face.
Okay. Any other challenges in terms of safely and sustainably developing the south of the island? Mr. Ryan, I see you wanted to go next, and then Professor Robertson.
Thank you, Shirley. Now, Richie mentioned that there are levels, and there really are levels, and I have to be very mindful of my level. Because in my experience, when you don't control your own destiny, then you ultimately have issues. And persons occupy an office, but persons have different personalities. And a lot of it boils down to their risk appetite. And what surprised me, I think a year ago, or even beyond that, when you speak about personal liability, and I would be taken aback by a governor mentioning personal liability, because I'm thinking to myself, if you're working in the best interest, and if you're working with all information available, you're simply doing your job. Life happens. Sometimes you get things wrong. So that risk appetite is a very important one, and I don't want to get political at all. But controlling your destiny is a big factor. And you mentioned in South, to get to South, you have to pass the Bellum. And for me, that's very, very critical. I'm in the zone all the time. Every time I'm in Foxes Bay, I lament the fact that Foxes Bay has been virtually untouched. No pyroclastic flow, ash over time. But those substantial buildings and those properties just had to be abandoned and left by the west side. So a bridge across Bellum is very, very critical to developing the South. And I think, personally, that's the first thing you should be thinking about. And I think more persons would think about occupying Corkhill if there was a bridge across the Bellum. Because other than the volcano per se, a severe rain event means that Bellum crossing is washed out and you're stuck on that side of the island. So for me, critically, a bridge across Bellum is very important. And speaking about levels, my job is to carry out the policy decisions that are made, that are ultimately made. And I have been proactive. There have been some inklings of wanting to go to St. George's Hill, for example, for tourism purposes. But what I find sometimes is you want to go to St. George's Hill to conduct tourism, but the powers that be wants to see a proper proposal, not just talk, something tangible on paper, saying what you intend to do. And my job is to think about the risk, think about mitigation, and I have been doing that. One thing about risk, every high-level meeting with Dr. Ryan, one central question is asked by me. What are the possibilities of an out-of-the-blue event? That hinges, and that a lot depends on that. Because if we're allowing persons in the evacuated area, in Zone V, and something, I mean, life happens, something can happen at any time. But if you have that reasonable assurance from that scientific point of view, it helps in being able to occupy and develop some of these areas. So this is my intervention, Shona. Thank you.
Professor Robertson, you wanted to say?
Before Richie comes in, and again, sorry for me being like a bad record, but you invited me here, so I had to give up my afternoon, so give me my 5 cents worth. We keep talking about why we cannot do things in this country. And we have to make a determination, yes, we can, and find the mechanism to get it done. We find too many excuses that, oh, the risk and we have to do all of this mitigation. For 15 years, nothing has happened. But you have these highly paid scientists at MVO. Yes, they're doing a good job. They can monitor even using their cell phones. Allow persons legally to go and do business. Why is it that a farmer who goes in and harvests 2 goats in the exclusion zone could be arrested and put in prison when they're simply looking meat for us to use? 15 years we have not had anything happening, and we're still behaving as though it's 1999 or 2010.
Okay, so the MVO can't put anybody in prison. We don't have that.
No, I'm not saying the MVO. I'm just saying.
What I'm saying is, like, as a legislator, you make the laws, and the government is in terms of the laws, and the MVO just feeds the information in for those laws to be made. So if you make a decision, we want to change the law or change the boundaries, you just come to the MVO and say, this is the information we need, and we'll feed into it. I don't have any, because I don't have the responsibilities that you have, I can't say what's a tolerable risk. And you made the point that, walking in London, the chance that you get stabbed, is higher than certain places in Zone V. And I mean, maybe that's where the MVO can help you. Like, what we can do is, like, how do we put our information into a context that is useful for decision makers, and whether it's, how that relates to getting stabbed in London, that could be that. Maybe that's the way that it needs to be done. But I say all the MVO doesn't and shouldn't make decisions because we don't have that authority. We just have the information that decisions can be made on. I know.
Okay,
but I'm just making that clear.
Professor Robertson,
Right, so,
and then Mr.
Yeah,
Mr.
so
Savage.
I was going to actually, to a large extent, reinforce some of the things that was being said. So I agree with the Premier that, am I calling the title right, Mr. Meade? Is it Premier? Premier is the correct thing. Right, Reuben. All right, Reuben, good. Come, Richie, too. Yeah, I was going to make a point that you mentioned challenges. I think challenges are fundamental to life. That's what makes us strong. So I would think of more, what are the opportunities that exist and how we could capitalize on that. I think in the context of Montserrat, there's certainly one that I think perhaps is even stronger now than it was before, that you have a larger diaspora community that have a stronger link to Montserrat than you had, say, at the start of the eruption. All territories in this region have a large amount of populations outside of the country that they reside. But you have an even larger one now who actually have a very close link with Montserrat, and I would utilize that. Montserrat have always had a challenging state because of your relationship constitutionally with the British government, and I think that's something they have to deal with. But I think you also have lots of opportunities to do things in the South, and I would agree with Reuben that you have to capitalize on that and utilize the knowledge that you have. You have a MVO that is well-skilled and resourced that can do things. I would work in that direction to think about what you can do with the South, which is why I say it's infinite when you conceptualize it.
I want to pick up on something that Reuben said. It's all right, I'm going to agree with you. I mean, back in the day, when the volcano went up to its absolute peak at the end of '97, London never had a say on where the boundaries would be for the safe and unsafe zone. Their view was it was the decision to be taken locally based upon the best scientific advice. Now, clearly, I can't say what might have happened over the years, but I can put my hand on my heart and say, in our day, I don't think you were ever required to accept a boundary which we didn't mutually agree on. I don't follow the scientific research as closely as perhaps I'd like to, although I did have lunch 2 weeks ago with Steve Sparks and Willie Aspinall, and there was only one topic of conversation. But we had a period where we had this very powerful group, wasn't just in London, some people were from other places, but we had the SAC. And I thought in the days of SAC, there was some very deep thinking going on about the problems the politicians and governors were facing here. I personally think there is a need for a revised senior scientific body, very close to SAC, which is asked to take another fundamental look. As you say, there's been no destructive action in 15 years. And surely this must be the time to look very closely at where preeminent volcanologists think the volcano is going in the next 10 years. I would be disappointed and I would be surprised if they don't listen and accept the views politically and locally that Montserrat has to be driven forward again. We simply have to create an environment where Montserratians want to come back to their country, where foreign businessmen are prepared once again to reinvest in Montserrat. And if I'm getting anything of this wrong, if I'm criticizing any of my subsequent successors, I apologize. It's simply through ignorance. But I would certainly be prepared to play a role in London if there is a view that we need to talk to the original members of SAC, to ask them for their views, not to re-sit on SAC, but to nominate people who they think would be eminently suitable to look at this issue.
If I may, it is not the SAC that's the problem. Okay, so let's not put, and it's not the MVO that's the problem. It's between, when Frank was here, we co-chaired almost everything. We had very frank and open sorry, not frank, but we had very open discussion. We had disagreements, and some savage disagreements, to the extent that at one stage, in order for him to get me to talk to him again, he sent me a case of red wine, which I could not refuse. So that's the extent of which we went.
That's one of the enduring myths that Reuben has put around. I never bought anybody in Montserrat a case of red wine.
Well, his driver brought the case of red wine and said it was from him. But the point I'm getting at is, and Richie touched on it, if the political leadership is not providing that guidance and willing to take up the challenge, then subsequent governors then see it as their constitutional responsibility to do what they have been doing. And this is where my comments have come in, not on the basis of MVO or anybody else, but a governor should not just come in here and be allowed to do whatever the governor wishes to do because they are unwilling to allow the locals to do things, and then the political directorate sits back because they're afraid to challenge. Okay, and that's the point I'm trying to make. So the leadership has to come from us. in terms of where we want our country to go, and we ask them to come along with us.
Yes, if I just might come back I totally agree with Premier Meade that it's certainly not the SAC that's holding things back. The SAC is providing information that says that various places around the volcano are relatively safe and safer than background levels. So just need to have that absolutely clear. As I pointed out in the end of my presentation, my experience on SAC is that we have seen, not right now, I'm really welcoming this discussion that we're having right now. I have not seen anything like this in any of our SAC meetings or framing any of the discussions from our SAC meetings. So I really welcome this direction that the conversation is going. But it has been, our experience on SAC is that there has been a political disinterest, really, in visiting the issue of different levels of hazard and risk in Zone V. So maybe that's changing. Maybe the winds of change are around at the moment, and so that implies that a lot of the information, the scientific information that is available, could be utilized to make some of these decisions. And, I do have to just reply also to the comment about SAC, because we are a group of 6 very senior volcanologists on SAC that have earned our place there. And with all due respect, we don't have the grey hair, perhaps, that the original SAC have, but you have a very eminent group of people on SAC who are still thinking very deeply and having good discussions about the level of risk and hazard on Montserrat. 2 other little points that I just want to come back on. Relative risk in Zone V. I mean, this is not something that we've calculated, but most of us have had some experience driving around Montserrat. I mean, I think that it's without doubt the case that the risk of having an accident driving in Montserrat is far, far greater than the risk that the volcano poses in most of Zone V, right? Another thing, in Zone V, there are sand mining efforts right in the same location that taxi drivers are taking tourists around. Mining is notorious for the risks associated with that, big trucks, everybody on the same road, inhaling the dust that the sand mining. Those man-made risks are much more important than the risk of volcanic eruption in Plymouth at the moment. So I totally agree that the focus needs to be on mitigating perhaps some of those risks rather than continuing to worry about the volcano. And then the very last comment is, I think Alvin made the point about risk appetite, which is clearly, I think, the root of the problem here. The mismatch in the risk appetite versus the development priorities of perhaps decision makers in London or in the Governor's office, and the interests of Montserratians that are long-term residents of Montserrat. So, I mean, I think that the mismatch is clear, and that's where the discussions need to focus in order to move things.
Okay, I've been told about 10 minutes ago I have 10 minutes to wrap up, so I just invite one significant question from the audience.
Yeah, it's Rod here, if you don't see me. Zone C has been open for a considerable time now, yet we've seen no spontaneous reoccupation. There's only a handful of houses that have been claimed. Now, I put this down to the lack of utilities, but should the government be doing things to encourage reoccupation of Zone C? Because you could substantially increase housing without the risk of doing things in Zone V. But it would need, I guess, considerable investment in terms of reinstalling utilities?
Well, as I'd mentioned earlier, come January-ish, we should be installing water in the Foxes Bay area as a start. So therein lies part of the issue and the solution. But we must not link Zone V with Zone C, because the activities which will happen in Zone V will be different to the activities in Zone C. Zone C is residential and agricultural. Zone V is mining and other such activities. So it gives you a daytime entry only, whereas in Zone C, you have full-time access. And as I indicated as well, to assist persons in that area, we're looking at the possibility of utilizing the ash, which means that we can clean up the areas, which makes it then more habitable for persons in there.
Okay, we're going to wrap up now. Final comments from each panelist. 1 minute, 1 to 2 minutes, and then we get out of here.
I'll go first since I'm at the bottom of the table. I think it's just to reiterate that I think there are lots of opportunities here for doing lots of things in the South. I think it requires the government and the leadership. I would not even say government, I say leadership in the context of both the science and the civil authorities to sit down and have some discussion, as well as I would try to bring in people in Montserrat and elsewhere to have a discussion about how they reimagine what happens in the South, and how you take that on a journey that will get you in the direction you want to get in eventually. I think there's lots of potential, and it's good that I'm hearing some of the discussion that's going on now. It probably means that there's certainly political will for it to move in a particular direction. That's good.
Thank you, Shirley. And what I would say, I stand ready for those policy decisions. Once those decisions are made, it's left to myself and my department and others to ensure that they are executed safely as possible and to mitigate against some of those risks. So we stand ready. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate the role of the MVO in facilitating decision-making, not blocking. So I think really I welcome further discussions about how we can do that better. As Premier noted, he said that maybe 90% of people hadn't read the SAC report, maybe 99% did not read the MVO report. So how can we make information that is more useful and can feed into the decisions that you want to make? I think that's where the MVO can contribute.
Okay. Final comments? Go ahead, Eliza.
Yeah, I would just end on perhaps an optimistic note. I think everything I think about sort of looking south, the name of the session, can be kind of encapsulated in what we think of when we think of St. George's Hill. St. George's Hill is this absolutely amazing lookout hill over Plymouth and the western flanks of the volcano. It's an absolute gift. St. George's Hill is a beautiful place itself, far less what you can see and what you can access when you're up there, and it's just waiting to be considered and to be it's a gift to Montserrat, and it's just waiting for its opportunity to be made more use of.
Mr. Savage, and then finally, last words with the Premier, Mr. Meade, the Honourable Premier. Mr. Savage, go right ahead.
I'm happy to leave him
okay.
for the last word.
Thank you very much for tolerating us and the lots of ignorance that I talk from up here. Hope you're going to enjoy your tour tomorrow and your day off. I know that Graham and his team have been working you to death. Don't hold it against him, but I hope that you have been enjoying it thus far. Thank you very much and have a pleasant evening.
Thank you to all our panelists and to each of you for being part of this vital conversation looking south. But as we look south and look ahead, we know the real momentum will come not just from monitoring the volcano, the Soufrière Hills Volcano, but from how we prepare, invest, and lead in the face of ongoing change. Let's carry that momentum. And thank you, and let's continue to work together. And just to remind you, or just to let you know, at the end of the panel, lunch will be provided for the field trip tomorrow, okay? So that's good news for those who are participating in the field trip tomorrow. Lunch will be provided. And thank you, everyone.